Okay, so after reading this last chapter with Luffy finally clashing with Emu, here are some thoughts. Emu worships Joyboy, Emu loves Joyboy, and Emu seems to be doing everything they are for Joyboy. Because I do feel like there's actually a really high chance that we might have been completely misinterpreting Emu's goals and history. Could it be that they aren't trying to create Mu's perfect world? That they aren't trying to rule as this secret tyrannical leader? No, maybe Emu's 800-year plan has always been a massive setup to put Luffy on a pedestal to let Luffy win where Joyboy actually failed. So instead of this Dark King conquering everything, I do feel like it may be more accurate to speculate that Emu might just be like the worst timeline version of Bartolomeo, basically a figure absolutely radicalized by a belief in the sun god, Joyboy to be more specific here, which is why Emu's grand design is for Luffy, not against him. He wouldn't be the final big bad of the story at all. That would mean that Emu wants Luffy to actually succeed where his lord and savior Joyboy couldn't. Luffy will defeat the real evil, the next Davy Jones, and Emu is gonna make it happen, and here's why. So, Chapter 1187 had a few very wild moments and a lot of really crazy reveals, honestly. Sanji is on the cusp of conquerorship. We'll talk a lot about that on Tuesday. If you've been waiting for that video, we're going to talk about it. Zoro is slicing down Super Summers, and Luffy has come face to face finally with Emu, now in Gear 5. But right now, I want to focus on two key details from this chapter that you might have missed or not even thought about. The moment that Emu calls Luffy Joyboy to his face, and the weapon that he used to crucify Loki, Stigma. And let's just focus on Stigma first here because it's kind of the setup for this entire video. In case you don't know the Latin root definition of stigma, it's a marking or a scar, usually a brand inflicted upon a victim. Also, as you know, it's used to discuss taboos or shameful things in society, but it's the root word for the stigmata, something super important. Now, when it comes to the most famous stigmata, many would probably recognize the stigmata as the injuries delivered to Christ, right, upon the cross, the holes in his hands, and the wounds on his feet, wrist, heart, head, and back from the various punishments thrust upon him. And so, as so often happens, over time, stigmata have been used to refer to the miraculous appearance of wounds on a person's body that correspond to the injuries that Jesus Christ suffered during his crucifixion. Little fun fact, throughout history, many individuals have actually claimed to bear the stigmata, such as Saint Francis of Assisi and Padre Pio here. What's more important is that they were believed to have received them not because they were a reincarnation of Jesus or something like that, but because of an extraordinarily deep spiritual union and belief in him. In essence, these wounds symbolized complete devotion, like a willingness to share in Christ's suffering, and an identity shaped entirely around following his example. That's why usually these marks are the greatest sign of a devoted follower. They become so consumed by their faith that they physically or spiritually bear the wounds of the one that they worship so much. Rock on. You got that? All right, pocket that for a second, because now we need to talk about One Piece Jesus so you can fully connect on my level and what we're actually talking about here. The Sun God Nika feels like a very strong Jesus parallel with all the other Christian stuff happening in One Piece, right? Like, you know, freedom, liberation, literally being reborn after death, dying, then returning to godhood, basically. It's exactly how Luffy even got Gear 5 in the first place. He scars himself under the eye to prove his dedication, he wears a massive chest scar, not to mention all the feasts after great battles that mirror the Last Supper, Luffy gathering followers like apostles, and Kuma reading a literal Bible and worshipping Luffy in the end as the sun god anyways. Hell, Kuma really doubles down on all of this with the entire Nothing Happened epic scene on Thriller Bark, where he directly just tells Zoro that Luffy's pain that he carries for others is beyond insane. Luffy is taking on everyone's burden. He puts his body on the line to carry the pain of others, just like Jesus was said to do. So if that parallel between Luffy and Joyboy and Jesus Boy here is the case, or at least a strong case to be made, why would Emu have an attack then referencing the devotion to that god? You know what I mean? Like, why would Emu use an attack named Stigmata? And not only that, why do all of Emu's attacks, like Omen, come from the area of his hand where the Stigmata would usually be for a person, right? The Stigmata is iconically a wound on the palm, and I think the moment that he blasts Zoro away makes this the most clear. So why then is his entire body covered in these weird markings and dots? Why does he have a weird dark halo around him that he always carries? Well, as I said, I think the answer is pretty clear. Emu worships Joyboy as a god. Emu bears the Stigmata himself and is inflicting these wounds upon the new followers of Joyboy, Luffy's followers. Exactly, by the way, what we see happen to Loki in chapter 1187 here. And this is because Emu himself is the most devout zealot of the Warrior of Liberation of Joyboy. I think, at least. But Manu, you now rightfully say, why in the world would he then be fighting Luffy? Why would he control the world and be like this tyrant figure for 800 years? Everything we see about Emu kind of contradicts the entire ideology of Joyboy that we've learned. Emu is all about oppressive control, not freedom. Time and time again, we've talked about this, we kind of see Emu's actions clearly contradicting his own words, and I do believe at this point that that might be very intentional. Because if you actually look at how Emu refers to Joyboy, he definitely doesn't seem to hate the guy at all. He hates a lot of others, or bashed on those associated with Joyboy, like the D-Clan, Lili. He calls Nidhogg a traitor, interestingly enough, and presumably characters like Zunisha or Emeth are kind of viewed the same. But never in the story does he actually directly oppose Joyboy as his enemy. In fact, he gets really pissed off when he loses the chance to have Joyboy. He killed Saturn specifically because Saturn let Joyboy escape. He freaks out when Joyboy's haki's blasted out towards him, but he's not angry. He gets mad at Loki, repeating the words of Joyboy that he apparently heard from him, but he also then immediately claims to live by the same actions of Joyboy, the same rules. You know, his entire speech on domination, Domi Reversi, Omen, etc., all of that is finalized by him saying, "Isn't that right, Joyboy?" So I would argue that it really seems like in some way, shape, or form, Emu believes in Joyboy. But then, what happened? Why is Emu now the bad guy if he's just Joyboy's #1 fan, basically? Like, what went wrong in the last 800 years? And I actually think I might have the answer to that. Hopefully, at least. I think that all of Emu's twisted acts, like his goals, his entire grand scheme that he's been working on, were all meant to atone for the failures of the Void Century. The failures we absolutely do see depicted on the Great Mural and in the Harley text. I actually proposed it once before, and while I will surely go back and forth on this idea since it's really just an option, obviously, I really feel good about this one right now. I do think that this figure on the left side of the mural, holding the Forbidden Sun with the giant wings and fighting Joyboy, is not actually Emu like we usually tend to think. I think that might be someone else. I talked about Nika in the past, but it might also just be Davy D. Jones. And instead, I do think that this figure right here, the Lunarian fighting alongside Joyboy, that one might just be Saint Nerona Emu. So for now, I kind of want to focus on the story I'm proposing here, what I think might have happened, so just check your disbelief at the door, and then we'll actually go and back it up with some evidence, and then get into how it all will explain so much about Emu and how this fight with Luffy might actually pan out in the end, and why apparently we're getting the final fight of the story right now, because it isn't. Alright, so imagine you're Emu. You were raised during the Void Century and followed your lord and savior, Joyboy. He's a man who brings laughter, bearing the pain of all those around him, all in order to free the world from a false king, a tyrant, Davy D. Jones. Davy Jones could be the Earth God or the Sea Devil. It doesn't really matter for this video. He's evil and controls the Forbidden Sun. So, your man Joyboy now sails across the world, becomes the first pirate, fighting Davy Jones's rule, gaining new allies, and spreading the word of his liberation. And suddenly, everyone's rallying behind him. They wave his flag after he frees their countries. He creates bonds with royalty and gods of the land like Nidhogg, Poseidon, etc. But then he goes to clash against Davy Jones and loses. He fails. That can't be right. Something is wrong here. He's supposed to win, right? You need him to win. You put all of your faith in this guy. He must win. After all, he is your chosen king, your god. So what do? Accept defeat here at the end of the Void Century? No. You decide to pick up where he left off. You can fix it. You can destroy Davy Jones, and then you can rewrite history. Now, even better, you can erase it, and then you can paint a whole new picture, a new story where Joyboy actually wins. Your king can win, your captain can become the god king that you think he always was. That is what I think might have happened here. I think that Emu might have erased the history of the Void Century, or tried to, because he couldn't live with the idea that his hero, Joyboy, had actually failed and lost. He can't stand for others learning the great Joyboy lost at the hands of this false god king, Davy Jones. And whether you're on board or not here, do you kind of like see the vision I'm seeing here? I think that Emu's gone so far in trying to please and fill Joyboy's wishes and shoes that he doesn't even realize he's now become the villain. He was radicalized by Joyboy's philosophy and actions and has twisted them to be perfect, but misunderstanding them fundamentally at his core. So to put it simply, what I'm proposing is that Emu is a terribly misinformed, radicalized crusader who fights in the name of Joyboy. If you want a comparison here, think of a mix of Eren Yeager and like the Spiral King from Gurren Lagann. Evil rulers who dominated the world to prevent a much greater evil, losing themselves in the process and becoming evil themselves. Their originally good intentions were ill-guided, and even worse when they eventually came to the conclusion that they could just become the villains so that the heroes could defeat them. They decided that any means of accomplishing their goals is fine because eventually they would also fall, and that is their responsibility. It's tragic, dark, and really messed up, but it's also really accurate to real-life figures who do the same thing, convinced that their goals for the greater good are above the rest because their god's will is being fulfilled here. And again, once you have that perspective, all you really need to do is look at him and listen to the words that Emu says, because he's just making it so obvious. Emu yelling, "Isn't that right, Joyboy?" could be evidence that his entire life has been fully dedicated to following and setting up the actions that Joyboy has made. He knows that Joyboy inspired and controlled the masses with his influence, and Emu believes that that's domination, but it wasn't. He just didn't really get the picture right. Emu's design, clearly some sort of Lunarian, right? Assuming that that's his body, which I'm still a little bit skeptical of, but let's just say that is Emu's true body. The wings, the dark flaming halo, the body markings. The dude is or was a Lunarian, right? And who did the Lunarians worship? Who did King search for? Joyboy. Not Nika like some other races, Joyboy specifically. So Emu may have been saved by Joyboy at some point in the past, freed from the clutches of Davy Jones's tyrannical rule maybe. Why do I think it's Davy Jones, by the way? Well, let's just look at what Emu says about the guy in this very arc. Look at how Zebek described him. Zebek stated that he was a worshipper of Davy Jones, the ultimate insult to Emu, who may be the greatest worshipper of Joyboy out there. Emu insists that Davy Jones was a false king, something that he should think if, like Emeth, he believed Joyboy should be the real king after all. Now, counterpoint that I can already hear coming, of course, and totally understand, why would Zebek then say, "Who do you fear more?" to Emu and then name drop Joyboy in there with Davy Jones if Emu supposedly worships Joyboy? That's valid, but you know what else is valid? Fearing the power of a god. the Lord, his will, his judgment. That can also be very scary. But also there's totally a chance that Imu realizes that his actions aren't perfect, that they're like an idealized lie that he's telling himself, and he fears that Joyboy might not actually love or respect his choices that he has done in his name. Or, straight up, Zebek just doesn't realize that Imu does in fact not fear Joyboy, but instead worship him. But I'll admit, it's kind of a good counterpoint that might get cleared up as we get some more information here. By the way, just quickly breaking from the script, one thing I quickly just wanted to put in here because I'm not sure if I have like another good spot to fit it in, but it's kind of interesting, of course, that the world government logo seems to kind of be based on the original Joyboy logo, right? You have like the symbol with the 8 circles and one big center circle, and now the world government logo is this kind of cross-shaped 4 rings, right, with like the central ring. So I do wonder if Imu actually, again, being a follower of Joyboy, just took his symbol, but then was like, okay, there were 4 people or 4 groups of these 8 circles that he actually didn't agree with, and then kind of, recreated the world government in that new updated version, right? Where like 4 circles are missing, and it kind of takes this cross shape, and the cross we know is like similar to the cross we have in, obviously Kuma's church and everything. So there's like weird stuff going on with that as well. Anyways, just wanted to throw that out there. Maybe you have like a better idea of how all that might fit into. Now, what about the shadowy design that Imu has? How does that line up with everything? It's clearly important because it's the first Imu design we ever got to see. Specifically, by the way, looking kind of in worship at a giant straw hat, and the version that we also see return in this panel from chapter 1181, and then again in 1186 when he's watching Brook. Focus on this question, and I think it'll make sense. When Imu's remembering Joyboy, what is he wearing? The answer is, of course, the same headpiece that he seems to have when he sits upon the empty throne. Now, what is that headpiece? Well, it kind of looks to be like a religious habit, a head covering worn by those devoted to a higher power. Actually, kind of similarly to how Gunko does it in the flower room as well. Buddhists wear a similar garb, Catholics wear them, a ton of religious entities are embodied by this outfit choice specifically. Symbolical, of course, for a variety of things like devotion, repentance, purity. I think that Imu's may be all about personal repentance, actually, because he failed to make Joyboy his king, but he will this time around. And to do that, I think that Imu first needs to take care of some things. First, he needed to punish those who originally failed Joyboy, and then he needed to erase history. Then he needed to recraft it, making small adjustments and changes so eventually he could build a new story for Joyboy. He could make a world that sees Luffy the way that he saw Joyboy perfect. And this starts with bodying just about anyone and everyone who messed up in some way. Joyboy couldn't have failed himself because of his choices. No, his crew must have been the one who failed him. The people who fought alongside him failed Joyboy, and they now needed to be punished for it. Really, what do we know about all these characters and groups affiliated with Joyboy? Characters like Zunisha, the Lunarians, etc., who failed Joyboy in the past? They were all slaughtered, punished to wander the world, enslaved, tortured, randomly just go missing. Imu seems to have taken it upon himself to inflict pain and suffering, the very stigmata that he has himself, upon those who failed to make Joyboy king. Now, throughout the story, we of course normally see this framed as a punishment for going against Imu themselves, but what if it's actually not? I kind of really love the idea that Imu's such a freak and messed up in the head, like such a religious fanatic basically, that he thinks it's just okay to harm his own allies if they aren't up to his own standard. Because he sure as hell is still very much doing that very same thing anyways. Saturn got erased for failing Imu in the context of Joyboy also, and Imu just has this very high bar for success. He's not a good boss by any means. And I would argue that we're seeing him now do the exact same thing to characters that are failing the new Joyboy. People who don't make the choice that Imu needs them to make to create his utopia, his perfect world. What do I mean by that? Well, look at what he said to Loki towards the end of chapter 1186. When Loki says, "Quit going after the kids," Imu actually responds with, Dost thou not know why? Shall I teach thee? 800 years ago, thy kind suffered defeat in order to save thy children. The nature of a race does not change in mere centuries. Simply abduct thy children, and I can control thee at will. Thou might not know what is happening to thee, but history repeats itself regardless. Now, obviously, Imu's trying to enslave the giants right now, something that we now know was done to them during the Void Century as well. So if Imu's plan is to recreate the events of the Void Century perfectly, with himself this time as the villain, then he needs to do the same actions that Davy Jones most likely did during the Void Century. He needs a mother flame, right? Instead of a forbidden sun. Working on it. He needs a big flood. That's happening. He's doing pretty good at resetting the stage and recreating everything that happened 800 years ago. But for this scheme to work, he also needs to inform the next set of Joyboy followers what to do in order to properly change fate this time. But they aren't doing it. History is just repeating itself, and it seems like the followers of Luffy are making the same mistakes as during the Void Century. And now in chapter 1187, we see Imu quite literally crucify and inflict the stigma upon Loki. I would say kind of seems like he's currently punishing Loki for failing to make the decision to abandon the kids, a part of the version of history that failed Joyboy in the past. Loki is then punished with the wounds of his lord because Loki needs to make a different choice this time. And to really bring this inflicting punishment thing full circle here, look at the weapon that Imu wields. It's the spear. You know, the spear. Oh, okay, I get it. You might not know why that's important at all. I talked about it in my Imu weapon video when it was first revealed because of all the biblical parallels. The weapon used to deliver the final blow to Jesus to kill him, the Great Heart Stigmata, that's known as the Spear of Destiny. I've kind of associated it with Nika's spear, and I think it could be the same weapon used to cut Joyboy down, which is why Imu now uses it to inflict wounds on those non-believers or failures, because it's the perfect weapon to literally stigmatize with. Alright, shifting a little bit into a higher gear here, thinking like gear 6. This might also explain Imu's very weird fascination with Lili, and as I said previously, it ties into his desire to erase history. It's all because of these pesky little indestructible rocks, the poneglyphs, because we've already established with you that I think that Imu's plan is to recreate the world, recreate the entire Void Century War, and this time change the outcome so that Joyboy wins and doesn't lose. But you know what makes that really hard? A bunch of very inconvenient, indestructible rocks that tell the true history of the world already. Because if Imu wants to control the narrative, control the view of Joyboy as the good guy and hero, and make it perfect, tablets explaining he's a failure with him apologizing simply cannot exist. Which is of course kind of funny and ironic, because that would mean that the poneglyphs might actually explain how to defeat Davy Jones, not Imu. Well, they would now, but you know, the irony that this map that we've all been chasing for so long actually leads to instructions on how to kill a dead guy would be absolutely hilarious. And since they were spread by Lili, it adds so much insult to injury, because I think that Imu worshipped Lili too. Why though? Why worship Lili if his heart belonged to Christ, his king, Joyboy? I've got a solution for that too. What if Lili is the first follower of Joyboy, the one who was responsible for recruiting the rest, the first apostle if you want, right? Because if Joyboy is our stand-in for Christ, then we sure need a stand-in for Mary Magdalene. And I totally think that there's a fascinating parallel here with Mary Magdalene for Lili in my proposed timeline here. Now, just to be clear, there are a few different interpretations of Mariam over time. Some say she was Jesus's wife, other a lady of the night, but instead I want to focus on how she's remembered as one of Christ's most devout followers. She remained loyal when many others had already fled. She witnessed the crucifixion and, perhaps most importantly, became one of the very first people to proclaim that Christ had risen from the dead. In many ways, Mary Magdalene didn't just believe in Jesus, she became one of the people responsible for carrying his story into the world. She preserved the message. She ensured that future generations would know how and what had happened. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that Oda is directly adapting that story one-to-one here, but if we're looking at all the symbolic roles, Lili absolutely crushes it here because she's the one figure tied directly to preserving the truth of the Void Century through the poneglyphs, essentially doing what Mary Magdalene did. And while everyone else was silenced, erased, or forgotten, Lili's actions ensured that Joyboy's story would survive at the cost of her own life, it seems. But wasn't that Emu who did it? Well, again, maybe not. No, again, if Joyboy in this version actually lost to Davy Jones, then maybe he's the one who made Lili go missing. Now this actually ties into a major issue that I kind of needed to address somewhere in this video. The dang Vegapunk message that actually states that Joyboy was a part of the Ancient Kingdom and fought against the alliance that, eventually would become the world government, the one that Emu currently rules. How would this then come to be? How would this even work with this theory? Well, what if Davy Jones originally ruled the world government and Joyboy's Ancient Kingdom clashed with him? Emu would have to defeat the ruler of the world government, left with a completely broken world where his true king, Joyboy, had failed. And from there, he then did the unthinkable. He took over the world government as a member of it, Saint Nerona Emu. The Celestial Dragons inherited a world where Emu was the only constant, this immortal figure sitting above every king and kingdom. And it turns out there's also precedent for this idea because think about how many allied kingdoms of Luffy are world government affiliates to this day. The Fishmen, Alabasta, Drum. Just because a kingdom likes Luffy, it doesn't mean that they aren't also world government affiliates, right? And the same could be the case for the Lunarians and Nerona Emu. Emu this entire time could have well been a ruler of a kingdom like Vivi or Shirahoshi are right now. And eventually, their worship shifted, the reverence once directed towards Davy Jones became centered on Emu himself, the god powerful enough to slay Davy Jones. And they then began treating him like a god, not realizing he never viewed himself as one at all. But he's been playing the part so that eventually he could pave the way for his real god. I think that Emu has been biting his tongue for a long time, building a kingdom for the Celestial Dragons. He kind of needed bad guys, and he created a religious government full of them. Holy Knights, Gorosei, Celestial Dragons, Marines. He's been using them, manipulating them, as we know he has, raising them into the ultimate symbol of corruption and oppression, fully prepared to cast them aside the moment that Joyboy finally returns. After all, if sacrificing a world government is what it takes for the new Joyboy to finally succeed where the first one failed, I don't think that Emu would hesitate for even a second. And all he needs is the first apostle to come back and tell the new story of Joyboy's victory, which brings us right back to Lili, and eventually, of course, Vivi. Yeah, if Emu truly is Joyboy's most devout follower, then I don't think he would hate Lili for spreading the word of Joyboy. Lili may have been the one who convinced Emu to follow Joyboy in the first place, especially if he's one of the 20 kings alongside her. I think that he really reveres her for that. The problem is that Lili spread the real story. She preserved the real history as it happened, not the nice, cleaned up version that Emu kind of wished had happened. From Emu's perspective, Lili may have done the right thing at the wrong time. Her actions kept Joyboy's legacy alive, but they also preserved the memory of his failure and flaws, and if Emu had spent 800 years trying to recreate the world and give Joyboy a different ending, then the poneglyphs become a constant, irremovable reminder of the past he's trying to rewrite. All of this brings us to why Imu is obsessed with finding Vivi. Why is Imu so obsessed with her? Well, maybe it isn't simply because she's Lili's descendant. I definitely think that it's a part of it, but I think it might go a little bit deeper than just that. Maybe it's because if history is about to repeat itself, every role needs a counterpart. If Joyboy once had Lili to preserve his message, someone to rally the apostle to his side, then the new Joyboy will need someone to do the same. Luffy needs someone who already believes in him, who has fought beside him, who understands his heart, and who can carry his words forward. Vivi has inherited that will now, that same role in Imu's story, and so Homeboy now needs to find Vivi for this to all actually work. He also might just need her to avoid spreading anything that would make Luffy not appear perfect in his eyes once he's become the true Joyboy. Alright. At the very beginning of this video, I said that we needed to talk about Imu calling Luffy Joyboy, and I kind of never really addressed that so far, and that's because I needed to paint you this grand picture I have here first. Because now, King of the World Nerona Imu versus Monkey D. Luffy. And he's now even going so far as to finally call Luffy Joyboy directly. Surely this will be an incredibly important moment, right? Yeah, of course, because this might be where we finally really begin to see that Oda's about to just flip the entire, table on top of us, flip the entire understanding of the story. I feel like the craziest reveal that Oda could possibly make at this point isn't that Imu wants to defeat Joyboy, it's that he's been planning to lose to him the entire time. Really think about it, right? What if the moment that Imu finally calls Luffy Joyboy isn't just him recognizing who stands before him? What if it's the first real confirmation that the person he's been waiting 800 years for has finally come back and arrived? Suddenly, everything starts looking completely different. We might begin to see the war now because finally Joyboy has arrived and history can now happen again and be rewritten with Luffy winning this time. But I think that there is one massive problem with that plan. One person that Imu just cannot account for, Marshall D. Teach. Because if everything we're saying about Davy Jones actually turns out to be true, then big ol' Blackbeard isn't just another pirate rising through the ranks wanting power. No, he is the modern successor to the very force Joyboy originally lost to and failed to overcome that Imu didn't account for. You know, the real villain Luffy needs to defeat opposed to Imu's fake, but then, by becoming an extremist, still turning out to be a very real villain too. That made sense, right? I hope. I don't know. Teach now exists as this true wild card that refuses to stay on Imu's carefully constructed chessboard. It's kind of like the Thimble from Monopoly storms in and yells Uno while Imu's setting up for his big gambit. It's the wrong game, the wrong enemy at the wrong time. Teach is a great aspect of this theory to me because it explains so much of his motivation. The reason that he wants to be king of the world government, why he wants to conquer the world, why his entire fleet is thematically based on an army, calling it Commodore and Admiral, he is trying to take his ancestors' alliance back. If Imu's entire 800-year plan has been to recreate the Void Century with a slightly different ending, then Blackbeard may be the one variable that ruins everything. The villain that Imu has spent centuries trying to suppress, eliminate, or contain, only for him to keep returning in a new form. First Zebek, and now Teach, the greatest thorn in his side, the man who slaughtered his god, his king, Joyboy. But it's okay because Luffy and his crew will of course have to crush and take down Teach, right? Luffy's crew can do it, he just needs to figure out the matchups for the final fight, and well, I might have figured those out for you already, because if you want to see who will battle who between the Mugiwara gang and the Titanic captains, you should check out this video right here. That's very interesting. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, thanks to our fantastic patrons, wherever they might be on screen, and I'd be really curious to, actually hear your thoughts on this theory, and if you, if you really don't like it, let me know, but If you like parts of it or have additional ideas, I would love to read them in the comments. Anyways, I will see you on Tuesday for Conqueror Sanji, and until then, have a wonderful remaining weekends.